Thrilling stuff.
Hello everybody, my name is Goodboy and welcome to an exciting video on the infinite regen build. Here we're going to be looking at different heroes and how you can itemize them and build them in such a way that they basically don't ever die, because their regeneration, even in a passive state, is ridiculous. So before we jump into the heroes that you can do to do this, I'd like to expand on the itemization that really makes all the difference. This kind of fits it all together. So there are quite a few items in Dota that give you HP regen, health regeneration, etc. The one that we've all heard of is naturally Heart of Tarrasque. Now, Heart of Tarrasque, when active, restores 5% of max HP per second, but when it's inactive, it also does have a 50% health regen amplification. It does also give you plus 400 health, and it does give you a huge amount of strength. So all of those things combined, actually, even in a disabled state, Heart of Tarrasque gives you massive levels of regen. But there are other items as well that work really nicely. Pipe of Insight, probably the most notable, giving you plus 8 health regeneration and the massive magic resistance. Not to mention, of course, that it's active components that help protect your team. Lotus Orb can also be pretty nice with its regeneration, as can Crimson Guard, as they have massive health regeneration and obviously very, very good protective, defensive items, and great for armor in Crimson Guard's case. But then finally there's Holy Locket. Now, Holy Locket is typically seen as a support item for healing heroes, so for example Omni Knight or Witch Doctor. But the amplifies heals and regeneration you provide by 25% also does work on yourself, and that's where you can see insane options. Now, putting most of those together, you don't necessarily need all of them. The Pipe of the Insight, the Holy Locket and the Heart of Tarrasque are musts. The Crimson Guards and the Lotus Orbs are optional. Usually you want to pick one or the other. But put those 4 out of those 5 items together, you decide situationally which one's going to be more important, and you get ridiculous levels of passive regeneration. And even without any other hero perks, you're typically going to get between 75 up to 100 regen per second, which is just silly, just absolutely silly with those itemizations. But it gets considerably more overpowered when you take into account certain heroes and their abilities, and in particular the talent tree choices that you can make. So first of all, I'll start off with active abilities. I don't like active abilities because obviously you can be silenced, preventing you from using them. And, you know, obviously you can't necessarily use them the whole time. I much prefer passive effects, which we'll get into later. But nonetheless, the regeneration rates are so insane that I'm obliged to mention them. So the first one is Alchemist, and with the talent tree you can get plus 30 chemical rage regeneration, which is pretty silly. But effectively, when active and when that talent tree is selective, Alchemist gets about 250 HP per second regen, which makes him really quite silly. Now, in terms of fountain diving, you know, not so much because of his armor is quite low. But nonetheless, that is really quite silly in terms of a general fight. And with decent protection and somebody else carrying an assault cuirass, your Alchemist isn't going to die. Certainly not while Chemical Rage is active anyway. The other one is Mars. Now, Mars is pretty insane in the sense that if you pick the plus 100 HP regen ability when his arena is active, is also really absurd. So you start a team fight, and effectively with the Holy Locket, bearing in mind its amplification abilities, your teammates are going to get plus 125 regen, never mind their own regen. So effectively, when you start a fight, your team will not die. And if you've trapped a couple of people in there, or you're concerned about not winning team fights, there's your winning item that is going to blow people out of the water. Of course, arena doesn't last very long, and then all of a sudden you've got all these regen items that, you know, are helpful to Mars, but actually in the grand scheme of things, not that great. So those are the active sides of the component. Then we can move on into heroes which have the passive components. This is, even when Heart of Tarrasque is disabled, still ridiculous. So Underlord, Axe and Bristleback all have talent trees that give them plus 25 health regen, in combination with the Holy Locket, Heart of Tarrasque, Pipe of Insight, etc, etc. All of those heroes, by the way, benefit from all of those items. You can start to itemize these heroes ridiculously well. Now, Underlord and Axe are both fairly formidable, but Bristleback in particular is almost unkillable with other talents, particularly with his, the spell lifesteal abilities. He can freely stand in the fountain for ages as well, with his back turned to it, and basically never die. So Bristleback, of the options there, of the Underlord Axe Bristleback, is easily the strongest hero, and with those kind of items, he just will not die, and the enemy can never kill him. I mean, seriously, they just won't die. You can comfortably buy a Radiance, and then get your Lotus Orb on him, and then he just is unkillable. Naturally, of course, you've got to get the farm to do it, and that's can be one of the limiting factors. A special situational kind of hero would be Pudge, because of the Flesh Heap stack strength that he gets from his talent tree, and obviously the regeneration he gets from Flesh Heap anyway. Take that in combination with these itemizations, and then if you keep killing your enemy and get a reasonable number of Flesh Heap stacks, again, Pudge sees insane tankiness that is absolutely ludicrous, 6,000, 7,000 HP. And for every Flesh Heap he adds to his collection, that's an extra +1 regen. So obviously think about how good of a game you're having, and how many people are being killed in his presence, gives you a good idea of how it can be done. But again, it is of course situational, because you've got to get yourself kills in order to do that. So if you're having a bad game, obviously the build doesn't work very well. The final mention before we get into the ultimate hero is Dragon Knight. Now, Dragon Knight doesn't so much have his, a quote-unquote HP regeneration skill like that, but he has Dragon Blood, and at level 25, you can get 2 times Dragon Blood HP regen and armor. Now, that makes Dragon Knight basically invincible with this build. And again, you can go for the full, everything regen, and he just will not die. But he can, for example, lose the Crimson Guard or lose the Lotus Orb for another item that's going to work for you. Maybe Radiance, for example. But effectively, once you select that ability on Dragon Knight, he just won't die. He can die fountains because his armor is so high and then his regen is so high. Now, his overall health isn't that great, which is why you definitely need that Pipe of Insight on him. But still, 3,500, 4,000 HP is nothing to be sniffed at. But Dragon Knight is pretty much unkillable at that point. So another great little ability. But bear in mind it is level 25, and of course you've got to eat your farm to get there. But the ultimate hero with the most silly, ridiculous passive has got to be Sand King. The +50 health regen is absurd. Completely and utterly absurd. And this gives him a passive regen of 150 health per second, which of all the passive abilities is the best one by far. And he just doesn't die at all. And then with all his spells, his abilities, his game impact, he is a superb initiator. And so, for example, you can skip one of your Crimson Guard, get a Blink Dagger instead, or Radiance or whatever, and then it's just kills. So that works really nicely there. Those are the builds that are that work insanely well. Obviously, a couple of disclaimers. These are very heavy farm items, so you're going to need to be having a good game. The other thing as well is that which ones are the most important. Obviously, Heart of Tarrasque, and then usually Holy Locket. Pipe of Insight. If you can get the Holy Locket, Pipe of Insight, Heart of Tarrasque, then you're golden, and then you can enjoy the insane levels of regen. But you do obviously have to take into account the lineup you're dealing with, and if massive levels of regen will work. 9 times out of 10, though, it definitely will work. Anyway, everybody, so that is the infinite regeneration build. By all means, do check it out, try it yourself, and see what you think. Thanks so much for watching, and of course, as always, please hit the like button, subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more great stuff coming soon. Goodbye.